Hi guys, my name's Barry and welcome back to the channel. I'm going to be doing a review for The Babadook today. Now, there is going to be spoilers in this review, guys, so if you haven't seen the film and you don't want to be spoiled, then of course don't watch the video. However, if you don't mind spoilers or if you have seen the movie, then continue watching. On our way to give birth to Samuel, Amelia and her husband are on the way to the hospital. However, they're involved in a car crash and her husband died. Almost 7 years later, she lives alone with her son Samuel and he is a problem child. She's drowning in all her problems. She's also drowning in all her son's problems. And her own sister doesn't even like her, but at the same time, she's also dealing with some depression. She can't speak to anyone. She's trying to hold down her job as well as trying to deal with her own problem child, and everything's just getting a little bit too much for her. It's all coming to a head until one night Samuel chooses a book called The Babadook, which is an anagram of a bad book. Sam becomes obsessed with the Babadook as well as Amelia. They become so obsessed with this book that they actually think the Babadook is real. But is the Babadook real? Or is it all in their heads? This is without doubt the most perfect character study movie I have ever seen in my life. It deals with a woman who is dealing with depression, illness, loss, problem child, you name it. She's dealing with absolutely everything in this film, and it's straight from the beginning right to the very end of the film. We follow this woman's journey from start to finish, right from when she has her husband taken from her, right up until the moment to the very end of the film. You can tell from the very beginning of the movie that she resents Samuel because her husband died when they were on their way to the hospital. For some reason, she blames Samuel for her husband's death. Obviously, if she wasn't pregnant with Samuel, then they wouldn't be on their way to the hospital, and then her husband would still be alive. However, Samuel would not exist. So from that moment on, it feels to me like she resents him, and she probably has abused him, not just physically, but mentally abused Samuel from birth right up into this moment. And we have to remember that we're only seeing a couple of weeks of what's been happening up until his 7th birthday. For the last almost 7 years, it's probably been going on since his birth. Like I said, their own sister doesn't even like her. We see that she doesn't go to her house anymore, and she doesn't like her son either. But because of that, Amelia has nobody to go to. There's no one that she can go and just let her problems loose to. So the only person that she can speak to is her son Samuel. Ultimately, Amelia has created her illness as the Babadook. That's the physical form that her illness takes. Now, Samuel being an easily influenced child, he also believes everything that Amelia is telling him. So together, they try and defeat the Babadook. We have to remember that her son has grown up without a father. He's grown up alone with his ill mother. So everything his mother tells him, he's taken it in over and over again, and he just believes everything that she says. Anything supernatural that you and I see in this film is all in their heads. I know that Samuel sees a lot of supernatural stuff, but that's because he is easily influenced. If you look back on the two support workers that come to the house, they look at the wall that supposedly got a hole in it with all these cockroaches coming out, and when they come in to look at it, there's nothing there because it's all in Amelia's head. If she convinces her son that something's there, he will think he's seen that over the past 6 and 7 years. But when an adult comes in and looks at something, they're like, what are you looking at? And she's like, oh, nothing. It's funny because her neighbour is called Mrs. Roach. And I think that's maybe a metaphor for Mrs. Roach always watching her, so that when she sees the roaches, the cockroaches within the house, she feels like there's something there watching her. As I mentioned, there is no monster. There is no Babadook. She created the Babadook herself, and she even wrote the book herself. But with her illness, she has convinced herself that this Babadook book came out of nowhere. She doesn't realise that she's the one that's created this. Therefore, she believes that the Babadook is potentially real. There's a few nods to this happening when you see her with the dark hands going to the police station. We think it's because she's burned the book, so she's got like soot on her fingers, but that in reality is most likely the charcoal that she used to write the extra pages in the book. We also go back to a scene in the film where her sister's friends asked her about her writing. She said she used to write for a few magazines, and she also wrote some kids stuff.
I wrote some articles for some magazines and did some kids stuff.
AKA the Babadook book. She even starts talking like the book that she wrote. In the book, you hear the Babadook saying "Dook, Dook, Dook," and then when she's talking to Sam, when she's having an outburst, she turns around to him and says, "Why do you have to keep talking?" When you look at the ending of the film, after they've defeated the Babadook together, just her and Samuel, she goes downstairs to feed the Babadook because it's still there. She gives it worms and stuff, and it's locked away in the basement. Now, that is a metaphor for her illness. She's suppressing suppressing that illness down in the basement, deep down. She's finally defeated it on the top level, but deep down, the Babadook, aka her illness, is still there. I feel like nothing I say will do this film justice, and that's the reason why I waited so long to do a review for this, because I seen the movie like 8 years ago or so, and straight from when I first watched it, I fell in love with the movie and I wanted to do a review for it. But at the time, I didn't feel I was professional enough. And even today, I still don't feel the words are going to come out for me to be able to justify how absolutely amazing this film is. It is truly one of the most phenomenally emotional films of all time. Essie Davis as Amelia, I have to say that Essie Davis, to me, is possibly the greatest actor of all time. Every time I see her in a movie, I just burst out crying because of how emotionally charged each of her performances are. She's in The Justice of Bunny King, which she's phenomenal in. She's in Nitram, which again, I broke down in tears every time she spoke, but especially The Babadook. That's the one that stands out because her performance as Amelia is one of the best performances I've ever seen in my life. The boy who plays Samuel was also very impressive for his age. People watch The Babadook and say, I don't like it because that boy is annoying. He's supposed to be annoying. That's part of the character that he's playing. But even though he is annoying at the beginning, we find out that he's not really annoying. We find out that he's truly scared of his mother and he's starting to recognize things. He's a little magician as well, so he can do things sleight of hand and stuff. But as the movie progresses, we see that he gets more and more scared of his mother because she is becoming the Babadook. She is pulling out that illness, that depression, and everything's been focused on Samuel because he's the only person there that takes the brunt of it. At the same time, though, Samuel is a boy with behavioural problems. He doesn't know how to communicate with people properly because he only hangs with his mum most of the time. So when he goes to school, he doesn't really know how to interact with kids. He doesn't have a father, of course, because his father died. So he doesn't have that father figure there to help him along the way. I feel like the marketing for the Babadook completely failed in all aspects. I think people who see the trailer for the Babadook think they're in for the next Sinister or Insidious movie where we've got these jump scares and there's this monster that comes out and kills people. That's what people were expecting. Not everyone, but some people were expecting that. So when they watched it, they're like, oh, that's rubbish. The Babadook's hardly in it. Or the Babadook, how did it die and stuff? And they don't realise that the Babadook is not real. They didn't realise that this is not a horror film. This is a psychological drama about a woman who's dealing with depression, illness, PTSD, and this just shows what a mother is doing to herself and to her own son. When I watched reviews for the film and just listened to people's thoughts on it, I just see that a lot of people are completely misinterpreting what this movie was about. They misinterpreted the intentions of Jennifer Kent's direction. And by the way, Jennifer Kent as a director, unbelievable. But because a lot of people were misinterpreting, or I felt they were misinterpreting the movie because I saw it as this drama, the psychological drama, I had to look up Jennifer Kent's intentions for the film to see if they aligned with mine or more so the people who think it's a monster movie. And luckily and thankfully, her interpretation for the film is exactly how I thought it was. I'm going to read a few things out that Jennifer Kent said about the film that helps align them with what I'm talking about. I won't read everything out, but what she said was, well, Jennifer Kent stated that, this was quite a good one, Jennifer Kent stated that American distributors were willing to help raise the budget on the condition that the Babadook be killed at the end. Kent refused as the Babadook represents inner demons to her, like mental illness or suppressed trauma, which stick with people for the rest of their lives. She didn't want to give the impression that something that could simply be killed and life will just return to normal. The movie was financed through crowdfunding instead. So she didn't want the Babadook to be this monster. That's not what this movie is about. It's about mental illness. So you can't bring the Babadook back in a different film. It just makes no sense. And it would take away everything from the original. These are the words of Jennifer Kent as well. She said, I am fascinated by what happens to people when they suppress their feelings, especially painful ones. Suppression may work momentarily, even for a number of years, but eventually the truth will come out. Amelia, the central character of the film, goes through the horrific and violent loss of her husband, the love of her life, in a terrible car accident. This happens as they're speeding to the hospital, Amelia in labour with her first child. The day her husband is killed is the day her son Samuel is born. The film begins almost 7 years later. Amelia finds she cannot love her son because she hasn't been able to face the grief of what happened. This suppressed grief builds such energy that it splits off from her, stalks her and possesses her, and eventually wills her to murder her 6-year-old child. This questioning of mother love is where the core of the horror lies. How does one cope with a mother, the oldest and most trusted symbol of love and protection, transforming into a terrible force of murderous destruction? How does a 6-year-old child possibly overcome that? This precarious relationship between Amelia and Samuel is also where the hope of the film exists. Despite its horrors, The Babadook is a love story, a mother moving through the centre of hell towards her child. So that's basically what this film is about. It's about her battling her inner demons of her depression. You'll see that she's been sleeping during the day. She's not really paying attention to Samuel. And she goes through these bursts of emotions from time to time, sort of like bipolar disorder, which I know a lot about. But the way that Essie Davis portrays that illness on screen, it was absolutely heartbreaking, and that's why she's one of the greatest actresses of all time, and this is one of the greatest performances of all time, as well as being one of the greatest psychological dramas, not horror, but one of the greatest psychological dramas of all time. So that is the best I can describe how I feel about The Babadook, guys. I don't know if I've done it justice or not. It has been a while since I first watched the movie. I watched it again for this review, and I was in an emotional wreck from start to finish yet again, because I know what it's about and how I know how she's feeling and stuff. It was just an emotional ride all the way through it, guys. But what are your thoughts on The Babadook? Did you initially interpret it as a monster movie, like Insidious, Sinister, etc., or did you know that it was mostly about this mental illness that this mother is dealing with? Leave your comments down below, guys. Let me know what you think of the film. And as always, thanks a lot for watching. Thanks for subscribing, and I'll see you soon.
Meeting adjourned.
I'll be right back.
What are you waiting for, huh?
Coming to get you, Barbara.
Ever play Skin the Cat?
Someone's in the back!